when you look at the Indian context, there are a lot of catchwords and catchphrases that have come in, from globalization to reverse innovation to frugal innovation to different kinds of, intrinsically Indian concepts, even jugaad, which I personally don't like too much because it has a connotation of shortcuts, But on the whole, is there an Indian way of innovation, or are these, nice phrases that you use and, all of it coincides in most markets?
Well, there are some concepts, some ways of innovating that I think that are universal sort of across the world. When you look at sort of very successful companies and sort of why they're successful, their systems, the way they deploy resources, the people, and you can go into a European company or you go in an Indian company, and the tools and the things they do that lead to success are universal. I don't really see much difference. Now, there are things that are unique, I think, to the Indian context because of the environment that we're sort of operating in terms of the challenges, the constraints that we face. There are certain kinds of things that we face in India that we don't face anywhere in the world, and that as a result leads to certain Indian responses. So that's where the things like frugal innovation comes from and other words. And I think it was just an observation, and I think it was initially coined actually by Carlos Ghosn, that Indians seem to be able to do more with less. And that's probably, to some level, there's some truth to that. I've been coming to India now for 27 years and I've spent a lot of time here. And it's something I think that's kind of just the way people grow up. It's something that's in their DNA, just to do more with less.
In a lot of senses, it's a hyper-competitive market with a scarcity of resources and a lot of focus on cost. So these are the three moving parts which are determining a lot of the, the innovations that are happening in companies. Is that limiting or is that an opportunity?
No, I think it's an opportunity, definitely. And I think your earlier question as to what kind of innovations are particular to India, to my mind, it's at the bottom of the pyramid. This has always been a problem in India. Consumption of everything is much below global norms. And how do you make it affordable? How do you innovate something which gets more consumption opportunities from the consumer? So I think not many people realize that, for example, in terms of consumption, the only three categories of packaged branded goods that are fully penetrated in India are soaps, detergents and matchsticks. Everything else is under-penetrated, mainly because of affordability. So if you find solutions that can make a category much more affordable, consumption in India grows tremendously.
Prakash, how are MNC companies, multinational companies, actually leveraging on this great opportunity?
I guess the opportunity is to try and do something which Mr. Godrej just referred to, which is to listen into consumers. And I think at the heart of all innovation has got to be the consumer, and try and understand how can we find newer ways of delivering value to that consumer? How can we find newer ways of meeting a consumer need which is currently unsatisfied? And I think you then try and combine that insight with technology that might be available around the world. It could be Indonesia, it could be, in our case, we have a global innovation center in Colombia. And we work very closely with them to try and say, hey, this is what the Indian consumer is saying. Now tell us what's the technology available around the world which can help us to address that need in a manner that's better than what anybody else might have been able to do.
Does the scale of MNCs worry you? The fact that they can, do this cross-learning across continents, get ideas germinating, and is that also one of the compelling reasons that you are aggressively going out, Mr.
No, in fact, I think from an innovation point of view, scale becomes a handicap. Yeah. It's excellent in terms of once you've innovated, once you've done R&D, to put it through the marketplace. Scale and size helps tremendously. But I think the best innovations come generally from smaller business entities.
Okay. Felix, you spoke about the China example. If scarcity and cost consciousness is driving a lot of the innovation in the bottom of the pyramid, what's the trend out there?
So in a sense, what's happening in China is exactly the kinds of ideas that we spoke about for the past couple of minutes. almost always, when you look at the innovative products that come out of China, after they're on your table, they look completely obvious. Everybody says, why didn't we think of this years ago? Oh, it's because we didn't have access to a deeper understanding of consumer behavior. A wine fridge out of China is one of my favorite examples. You look at the wine fridge and you think, this is a terrible product. One of its weaknesses is that it's not vibration free. So every time the compressor kicks in, the wine fridge shakes all your wine collection gently, so that after 20 years of shaking, if you open that bottle of Bordeaux, you can be sure it's going to be vinegar. This is a huge commercial success. Why? Oh, it's for consumers who get a bottle of wine, drink it the next day.
How scalable is this? I keep coming back to scale because the innovation to be successful has to make a difference to many lives, not just a few. And in India, I mean, dipping into the case study that you did with the Dabbawalas, the nice way of looking at it is that it's a great enterprise. It's been on for 100 years. But the other way of looking at it is it's been pretty much there. I mean, we don't have a pan-India Dabbawala network.
I sort of look at the Dabbawalas sort of in a different way. First of all, the Dabbawalas in some ways is not a typical business. I mean, it's an organization that's been around, as you said, for more than 100 years. I look at sort of it as sort of an organization that proves that you can do extraordinary things with sort of very ordinary people, and sort of to basically sort of create a performance level that some companies like the FedExes of this world sort of look at and saying, how is this possible? They don't do any of the things that we do, and by the way, they don't do any of the things that we teach them in business schools. And yet it works. And you have to look at the whole system to understand why it works. You have to look at the entire system of the Dabbawalas, of how it works. You have to look at process, organization, the way they manage themselves, the culture, and what I sometimes call the X factor, sort of the secret ingredient sort of that makes him tick. The problem is when you have such a highly finely tuned system and you're trying to replicate it, it becomes very, very difficult. Most companies, until we did this case on the Dabbawalas, most people didn't really understand how it worked. And in fact, when we asked them, I don't think they really understood how it worked. And so first you have to, before you sort of get into scalability, you have to figure out sort of how the system works, and then figure out whether in fact it can be scalable. I think actually the Dabbawala system in its purest form is probably not scalable because there are some things that are just unique to Mumbai.
Out of every 3 new products we put out, 2 are withdrawn within 2 or 3 years.